Thank you very much, Quincy. How you doing, Fred?
I'm great.
It's good to hear. It's good to hear. Welcome to OBR Weekly, where we start with our mics muted and we continue for an hour every Monday evening at 8 p.m. And we are here to talk about the Browns losing to themselves on Sunday 21-7 with 6 freaking turnovers. Man, we're going to get into that. As you know, my friends, this is a show which is dominated by your comments and questions. We want to talk about what you want to talk about, and that will be about the Browns and where they go from here with 3 weeks left in the season and a very important offseason coming up. Fred and I are not going to be your draft experts like Jacob Roach, but we will talk about what the team's direction will be coming up here. And we would love to hear your comments and questions and echo off of that as we move forward. Fred, your impressions from talking with Kevin Stefanski this afternoon. What are the big headlines coming out of that conversation with Kevin today?
Quarterback undecided. Gotta wait for the appropriate time to talk about it, but we have more things to think about. They're still processing the loss to the Chiefs. I think I could have processed it a lot quicker for him, but not much information. He's hopeful that Tillman and Njoku can play this week. And again, JOK is not going to play this week, but he's not going to really have an update until the appropriate time. So I don't know what that means. Why can't you just say he's not going to play this season? I even a guy coming back now takes a couple weeks to practice. I don't really understand, but that's the headlines. No information other than we got to play better. We got to do better. We got to coach better. We got to do a lot of things better. No real answers.
Right. That information, did that take a certain amount of time to impart, or was that like 3 minutes and done, or was that like 20 minutes of questions and answers? And I'm just curious how long that took.
It was over 15 minutes.
It was 15 minutes to say all that?
Uh-huh. Most of it was the reporters asking the questions, but he does, if you ask questions about an opponent or somebody else, he'll talk quite a while and use up his time, on stuff like that. But if it's about information, 1 word, 2 words, because they might not be 3-11 if he gave out more information. They could be if they were to give out some info, they could be 2-12.
Exactly. And they could have had 7 or 8 turnovers rather than 6, if that information was out there. But JOK, I'm not sure I want to see him, this year after that injury. Let him take his time, get healthy over the course of the off season, and get healthy. That was a very dangerous looking injury. So I tell you what, let's hear your comments and questions. Let's go straight to them if we can. Let's go to the first question from Manimal 1955. He says, how did the Browns let Darden go? Prochet and Tony are busts. Darden did very well with Seattle as a returner for them. Well, Darden made some decisions that were pretty questionable, don't you think, Fred? But he did look pretty good when he was making smart decisions, but that seemed to be the issue.
I think he caught the ball at inside the 5 or something like that, but the key word there is he caught the ball.
Right.
I mean, Prochet, that game was over on that play, in my opinion. I said to those next to me, You can't turn the ball over on the 21 to Patrick Mahomes. You're down 7-0. It's almost like you spotted them 7 points. It's kind of like the
Yeah.
Bengals opening kickoff return. I say this almost in jest every week to those around me. The Browns win the toss, he defers, and I say, well, it'll be 7-0 before they get the ball back. And I didn't expect them, the way they got the ball back, but it was true. It was 7-0 before they got the ball back. And I don't understand, all this stuff, especially the Chiefs. Now they got a 3-and-out, and then they punted and the fumble. But still, that's another issue I don't get. But anyway, yeah, the Browns play these games with the number, with roster, and they think they can just keep recycling these guys through. They always, they have somebody in the roster, they waive them, they don't get signed, they put them on the practice squad. Then they do it again. Well, Darden got claimed. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if he had been on waivers before. When they first got him a couple years ago from Tampa Bay, he was more of a hot commodity.
Right.
And it seems like they kept him on the roster all year, even though he wasn't active. He was like an inactive. And then, they just haven't been good at return men. I mean, they've signed specialists. The first one had 2 years in a row where he had a ruptured Achilles, and then he had a blown out ACL, and then they signed another one, same thing, and they get into the season, they don't have a return guy. And then last year, I remember it was Prochet picked up off of Baltimore's practice squad. He did pretty good returning punts, but then he's been kind of languishing behind Darden and Tony. They both get let go, and so they go back to him and fumbles the first return. So yeah, I mean, when they have him, they didn't obviously value. Their answer is, we had to make room for, whoever they brought up last week or whatever. It might have even been Tony. I don't know, but they brought somebody up, so they had to let Darden go. He gets claimed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if there's talent, if you release a talented player, you take a risk, and Darden is now gone, and they're probably not going to get him back. Chat username says, "I believe in purging the team of players and coaches. Who do we keep as a core? How big of a stick do we need to ensure accountability and discipline?" So I guess the question here is, during the off season, how aggressive do we get to make sure that the team knows that a 3-11 or whatever it turns out to be record is unacceptable by getting rid of people who are not part of the solution heading into 2025, right? Um, and that let's talk about the coaching ranks right now. We all know that Kevin Stefanski loves stability. Probably isn't going to do a massive purge of his coaching staff. At the same time, you're 3-11, maybe headed toward 3-14. How in the world do you return your coaching staff after a season like that?
Yeah, to your point, it seems like he's just very slow to make any moves, and now granted his first year they went to the playoffs, but even after a down year or two, they just don't make changes unless they're forced to. Even the year Mike Prefer was let go, they waited until Indianapolis made a change, and Ventrone became available, and then they kind of moved earth to get him before they let Prefer go. And it just seems like, unless it's coming from the top, and I think last year either the ownership or Andrew Berry strongly urged him to move on from Van Pelt and to get another offensive coordinator who was more in tune with the spread offense, and that's how you got Ken Dorsey. So, you can make cases all the way around. You can make a case for stability, but then you can make a case for, you know, who do you is accountable for all the false starts and the pre-snap penalties? Is that coaching? Is it the
Mm-hmm.
players? Is it both? Is it the coaching lets them get away with it? Like they don't get disciplined. Like you screw up. Maybe you're inactive instead of, oh, you go out the field for one play. Um, you can see all the way around. Same thing with toughness. You feel like, oh, we want them to all not get hurt, so we don't practice as hard of hitting. But then they have more guys on injury reserve than other teams. Then you go the other route, so you can make arguments. Same way with, you could say Andrew Berry hasn't had a chance to draft in the first round for 3 years. Well, why is that? Because that decision to trade, all your picks away for Deshaun Watson. So do you say in 5 years? You know what I'm saying? I can make a case all over the place for getting rid of them, keeping
Mm-hmm.
them, or what? Who's to blame with all this?
Right. Right.
I thought of this today and probably at some point write something about this. One of the biggest things last year, we all remember the playoff game when the defense got annihilated. And I think all of them said the same thing. We picked a bad day to have a bad day. Well, there was more to it. I mean, look at the defense this year. It wasn't at all what we saw last year. Now yesterday I thought they played good, but
Yeah, I did
inconsistencies,
too.
and they haven't taken the ball away and things like that. So, we thought they were good. Then they dropped down from first to like 23rd or something. So it's a lot of, I haven't formulated all of the answers in my head, but I know a big part of it is quarterback. Quarterback can solve a lot of ills. Patrick Mahomes, he didn't need to yesterday, and he was unavailable at the end of the game. But, he's the type of quarterback can look mediocre for 59 minutes, but if they're down with 1 minute to go, he'll lead you down the field and you win the game. And nobody cares what he did the rest of the game. I think he had 158 yards is all passing.
Right.
And 2 of their 3 touchdowns was the result directly of the Browns, of
Mm-hmm.
the fumbled punt and turnover on downs, I think, deep in Browns territory. And so the turnovers, all that, beating yourself, I don't know if you can just say you run it back. I mean, reality, Haslam doesn't want to make these moves, but he fired people with a lot records, might even not, I think Chud was 4-12 in his first year, and that's all he got, one and done. But I have to
Right.
think they either really don't want to hire Mike Vrabel, or Mike Vrabel's not interested or wants to see what's available. Or that to me was the biggest reason to make a move before the end of the season. If you're going to move on, you need to know that you have an upgrade. I get the stability and the growing in the job, and I think that's, in my opinion, where they're going to be. But the question is, what are they going to do at quarterback? How are they going to work around this?
Yeah. Well, Paul Spencer has an idea. Let's get Patrick Mahomes.
Could
That
have
solves a
had
lot
him.
of problems. Yeah. We had our opportunity at that one. We kind of blew that one. Or Kansas City just beat us to the punch. Actually, I think is more
No,
the.
Barry, they had a pick number 1.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I mean, would you trade Myles Garrett up for Patrick Mahomes? I mean, no question, Myles Garrett was the pick that year, but I'd make that trade. We know
Yeah.
how important the quarterback is. Myles Garrett's important, but has he won? How many games has he won you? Compared
Right.
to, like, I think Mahomes has led the team to 5 or 6 wins on the last drive this year.
Mm, okay. Well,
And he
I've
does
got my
great
nightmare for
commercials.
tonight picked out. All right.
He does great commercials.
He does. He is very effective in those commercials. I'm damn sick of him. Jeffrey Champion wants to know what's your thoughts on Najee Harris. Should we pick him up? I've got some thoughts on this. Pittsburgh's got two running backs here, and I'm not sure they know what they want to do with them.
Well, they have two quarterbacks too, and you know, Justin Fields is intriguing to me as an option. I don't know about Najee Harris. I mean, I think he's a good running back, but I don't think that solves your problems. I think you got to get the first one solved. You got to identify, is there any quarterbacks available that are upgrades from what you have with Jameis Winston, DTR, whatever. And you have to look at your line and feel, is this line bringing them back, or what do we need to do to protect said quarterback?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think you need to approach, I know you're limited a little bit, but I think you need to approach this offseason like you did in the offseason when you went out and got Deshaun Watson. You have to say, we have to do whatever it takes to find a quarterback that we can win with, and not just
Right.
a placeholder. And
Right.
I don't know if it's in the draft. From what I gather, it's not, but I don't know if there's any veteran, that you feel like is that you can go out and get that can help turn your thing around, because I think the Browns defense can get fixed. I think a couple areas we were talking about earlier, they were talking about in the draft and things like that. If you can get your defense and special teams and take the pattern of the Steelers, find a quarterback that just does not lose games for you. Russell Wilson has become a game manager. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
watch yesterday's game. I didn't really even hear much about it, but when he played the Browns, he only threw for 158 yards. He threw 2 touchdowns, but he didn't ruin the game. He didn't turn the ball over. And that's what you need. Good defense, good special teams, and somebody that can put points on the board without making major mistakes.
Right.
Najee Harris, I think, would be a piece, but I don't know, that if he'll have the line, behind him or in front of him to be even more effective here than what we've seen with the running backs they got.
Yeah, I like their other Warren running back. I like that Warren fellow. I'd probably take him over Harris personally, but that's
That's
just
who
me.
they're going to keep.
Yeah.
He's younger, and yeah.
If they're smart, that's who they would keep. Manimal, reflecting my opinion as well, he says, I think the Browns defense played their best game of the season. 6 turnovers and only 14 points off of them. KC could have scored over 40 points. I think that's a great point. I mean, you keep Mahomes and company to the scores that they had, and you give up 6 turnovers. That's saying something. And it leads to your point, Fred. If you just have a competent quarterback, or a competent offense that doesn't turn the ball over 6 times or 4 times with interceptions, that game's winnable. From my perspective, with that defensive quality of play that they had yesterday.
Jim Schwartz said something. I saw the statistic, and since they traded Zadarius Smith, they haven't had the pass rush that they did prior to that. And I don't know all that went behind it, but knowing what I know about this organization, it seems like Andrew Berry goes out of his way many times to accommodate players. And Zadarius Smith, getting a little older, thought the Browns were on a championship run. I think they accommodated him, and I don't know if it was the best move overall, because since they've traded him, they haven't had the pass rush, and that's what Jim Schwartz says they thrive on. That's what he attributed some of their drop, and he wasn't blaming the Browns for trading him. It was just kind of a matter of fact, and statistically, I think that bears out. You have potential with McGuire and Alex Wright and so forth, but I think Jim Schwartz is competent enough and with input that they can get this defense fixed. I think there's been, several issues, on that side of the ball. They thought bringing back the 30-something defensive tackles, Harris, along with Tomlinson and Hurst, would be good enough along with Zadarius Smith to get that pressure up front. Okoronkwo's had a down year.
Mm-hmm.
Alex Wright got hurt. And then obviously JOK's been out. But the cornerbacks, they bragged how they were the best in the world. I'll go with Denzel Ward, but I don't buy that with Greg Newsome and Martin Emerson. To me, I think they had a regression. They were exposed, when teams, they went at them guys and they exposed them. And it might have been because they didn't have the pass rush that they needed. So I just think you can identify which is the quicker fix, and I think it's defense. Get your pieces to get that defense back in the top 10 and get the special teams, the kicking in that, and use that recipe. And then on the offense, just get a competent quarterback, even if it's like a Jacoby Brissett or somebody like that can manage the game and not ruin the game for you until you have a chance to find that franchise type quarterback.
Right. Well, Manimal has a suggestion. He says Minnesota's probably going to keep Darnold. What about J.J. McCarthy that they drafted? McCarthy was a top 10 pick last year out of Michigan for Minnesota. So they're probably asking for our top draft pick in exchange or something akin to that if we want to get McCarthy. Are you willing to pay that kind of price for the ex-Wolverine?
No, personally, I mean, it's hard for me to believe they would trade him, when you got a good year out of Darnold. I would think, they may go with Daniel Jones and McCarthy if Darnold decides he wants to move on or become a free agent. But yeah, I think it's way too early to see all those things. I mean, it's also hard for me to say, okay, Darnold has a good year and now he's the best quarterback to ever played the game when we saw what he did before. So I don't know. I don't think they're going to. If you draft a guy and he's your franchise quarterback, you don't give up on him because he got hurt.
Right.
I think that if they feel that much with him, they'll go with him. I don't know. The Browns weren't in the market for quarterbacks. All I did was see him against Ohio State. I never really thought he was a top quarterback. I know Jim Harbaugh did, and he got drafted up there, but I really don't know enough about him to evaluate his quarterback play.
Yeah, I was surprised he went that high, after watching him play and beat the Buckeyes continuously, but I still wasn't all that blown away by him. Hey, if you want to get a question into the legend, hit us up in the YouTube or Twitch chat rooms. We've got room for your questions or your comments if you want us to talk about them. In terms of the Browns defense, Fred, I will still maintain that if the Browns have a competent offense or a competent quarterback for those first 8 games of the season, this offense is not ranked 23rd, or this defense is not ranked 23rd. This defense is ranked somewhere in the middle of the pack, or maybe even in the top half of the NFL. I really think that this defense is a victim of the bad offense. All the 3 and outs, all the turnovers, constantly being on the field. I don't know what the season-long time of possession is against this defense, but I really think that they are, as much as anything else, a victim of the poor offensive play, this year, in that their statistics sort of reflect that.
I agree to that. To your point, in those first 7 games, the Browns didn't score more than 18 points. In the 18-point game, 2 of them were a safety. So you're scoring 17 or 16 points. The defense gave up, no more than 21 points. If you would have scored, other than the opener with the Cowboys, if you would have scored, 22 points, which isn't a lot, right now the Browns, have went up 3 or 4 more points a game than they did early in the year. But if you'd have just scored another, even in the 21 or 22, you'd have won at least 2, 3, or 4 more games. I think that it's a domino effect that the defense was beaten down a little bit, even though they're professionals, but knowing that there's really no chance on the offensive side. And yeah, that 1-6 start led to this season, because if you were 3-4 or whatever, you're still in it. Your season's over when you're 1-6. I mean, and they know it, and they could say whatever they want. They weren't mathematically eliminated or whatever, but I think that affected then the defense, carried over the special teams. And now when the offense got going, the defense dropped off, and the defense cost them some games. The Broncos game, they couldn't keep a lead, and there's other ones along the way. So the complementary football does make sense, but I blame that on Kevin Stefanski or whoever made the decision, and he said he did, to keep throwing Deshaun Watson out there for those 7 games. I've said this before. If he didn't get hurt, how long would he have started? Would he still be the starting quarterback if he didn't get hurt? Even though they might be, 2 or 3, the same record they have now. So I do blame that. You could have went to Winston earlier, even in a relief role, and went back to Watson to start if you wanted to, but you could have at least won. You could have won the Giants or Raiders game easily. You lost you had the winning drive available to you in both games. One, you had a touchdown call back. The other one, you threw an interception, turned the ball over on downs, drop passes. So, yeah, it's a lot of it contribute to this, but I also think that's how close it is in the NFL. A play here, play there is the difference between going on a multi-game losing streak and your season being over.
Yeah, the whole Watson thing from 2022 to now just has a stint of desperation on it. I mean, they were so desperate to sign Watson, and it's so desperate to try to get something out of that contract, and the whole thing is just a huge embarrassment for the Cleveland Browns organization and everyone associated with it. Jeffrey Champion, would you give up a 5th-round pick for Bengals backup quarterback Jake Browning? I'm not sure what the upside is of Jake Browning, whether it's high enough to justify giving up anything for him at this point, Jeffrey. I don't know if you have any strong opinions on Jake Browning there, Fred, but I'm not sure he's that strong of an asset for your quarterback room that you would want to invest in him.
I'd probably give Bailey Zappi a chance before I'd go that route. You got him on the roster. He reminds me of a Brock Purdy type, that those kind of guys could probably do well in Stefanski's offense. I think we saw with Joe Flacco, we see with Jameis Winston, you saw it with Jacoby Brissett. Stefanski does pretty well with them guys. You just got to have the guy not turn the ball over. And that's been the downfall with Winston, is 13 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, that play action pass and so forth. I don't know. I don't know enough about Jake Browning. My opinion is, I've just seen over the years, by and large, you're even seeing it with Sam Darnold, okay? Everybody thought he was one of the best 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the NFL draft that year. And for whatever reason, probably a lot to do with the situations he was in. And now he's flourishing in the right environment. He had talent. Baker Mayfield had talent, guys they didn't draft, like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Think about all those chances that guys they passed up. But if they're in the right system, I would much rather have somebody that has top of the draft talent. And that's why I feel like if you're going to draft a quarterback, you really have to, have a chance to get the best one in the draft. You want that sure shot guy, the Joe Burrow, the Andrew Luck, the one that you or me could draft, or it's our turn, we have the first pick. Oh, I'll take him. When you're reaching and taking third round guys, second round, fifth round, I just think you got to be lucky, Everybody that takes a guy, down the road is got to be lucky, They all have talent, but I just want, if you really want the franchise quarterback, I just think you got to be lucky. That's why they've had 39 starters, and they played for 2 years to get that, and that's why it's a bona fide question why you wouldn't have taken Patrick Mahomes if you didn't think he was. If you thought well enough of him to trade up to get him at number 10, and the Chiefs went ahead of you and did so, maybe you should have taken him number 1.
Right. Well, we could catalog the Browns' mistakes at quarterback. It would take us longer than we have here with this program. I do want to talk a little bit about thanking you for tuning into the OBR streaming network. The OBR streaming network is possible for 2 reasons. One of them is Core Home Fitness, which I'll talk about here in a minute. Well, I'll talk about it now since we got the graphics up. Core Home Fitness, as you know, makes the world's best adjustable dumbbells, top ranked on the planet by Consumer Reports, New York Times, Men's Health, you name it. The best dumbbells you are going to be able to find. So if you want to get in shape, Core Home Fitness is the place to go. Check them out at corehomefitness.com. They also have training programs which are available on your phone or via your web browser. They have really put a lot of time and effort into these training programs. They don't necessarily focus on the barbells, just good for getting in shape, no matter what kind of shape you're in right now. As you can see, they also have the adjustable incline benches. They have a US-based support team, fast shipping, hassle-free returns, you name it. We just want to thank Core Home Fitness for supporting the OBR, for supporting the OBR streaming network, and making this program possible. So thank you again to Core Home Fitness. Alrighty, let's get back to the questions and comments that we have here. Comment from Lemonade with 2 X's at the beginning and back of it. Says the Browns as an organization makes bad decisions. The mentality to try to win now could be seen when we picked up Odell Beckham. Baker Mayfield had so much potential. Getting Odell was a mistake that I believe messed with Baker's development, and the tension Odell brought into that locker room had a major impact on his development, I'm sure. And that was John Dorsey who did that. Again, a whiff of desperation with that particular move. Dennis Yaus writes, Bailey Zappi tore up the Browns a couple of years ago. Let's see what he can do. Chances are DTR would only throw for about 160 and a couple picks. What do you think of that idea, Fred? I'm pretty darn convinced that quarterback room, Watson is going to have to be on the team next year, but, he can sit in the corner, on a corner of the bench as far as I'm concerned. Other than that, that quarterback room needs a complete reboot as far as I'm concerned. Should we see what Bailey Zappi's got before we, open the escape hatch there?
Well, yeah, I mean, as far as I think you're going to get, if Bailey Zappi plays, he could look pretty good, but you might get some fool's gold. You might be fooled into thinking you got something when you didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, there's guys retreads all over the place, and I don't know. I don't know how high or where he came from. I know he started with the Patriots, but I just think you got to exhaust other avenues and see, kicking the tires, who might be available, you know, and think outside the box and see what you can come up with. I don't know. At this point, I think you feel like you know with what you have with Winston. I don't know what they think they can get out of Thompson Robinson. But yeah, I mean, why not give him a chance, see what he can do? Like you said, I remember that game. I think I might even been watching it with you and over at that restaurant when Patriots just killed the Browns that game,
Mm-hmm.
and he looked pretty good in that. So it's at this point, I don't think it matters. I mean, I'm not the biggest draft guru, but at this point, I feel like you might as well. You're this far in, you might as well get a top 5 pick, and have a chance, to do something, with it. I don't know if there's any quarterbacks that I'm not getting the idea there are any, that
Mm-hmm.
so it's frustrating when you feel like you're going back to that same old recipe. And I know somebody said Baker Mayfield. I mean, Baker Mayfield, I don't know if he'd ever done that here. I do blame Odell Beckham for that season. And that's where I say the Browns as an organization, and I don't know if I fault them because I think they have a good heart. I'm talking about Andrew Berry. He went out of his way to accommodate Odell Beckham when him and his dad ruined that season. I mean, when they did
Mm-hmm.
that, the season was over, and he let him out of the contract or worked it out, and he was able to go to the Rams, get a Super Bowl. And the Browns didn't need to do that. They could have just do what they're doing with Watson, go home, and at the end of the year, you can go on your merry way. And that, yeah, that was John Dorsey. John Dorsey, I will say this: a lot of the guys that he drafted are some of the better players on this team. And other than he didn't draft Lamar Jackson, he didn't draft Josh Allen, or he didn't draft Sam Darnold. Um, but especially the first two I mentioned, he could have drafted them at quarterback with that first pick that he did not. So it's frustrating looking at it in hindsight. And that's where I say sometimes it's the luck of the draw where you just have a guy who likes somebody and another team likes somebody else and they fit in better and they take off.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And Baker Mayfield now looks like a guy should have they should have stuck with, but then again, he went through a couple of bad years, before he finally arrived down in Tampa Bay, and people would have been calling for his head, if he had been stayed up here in Cleveland. And it's a puzzle that the Cleveland Browns have never been able to figure out. But one thing I'm pretty sure of is that the answer is not currently part of the organization right now. I am pretty convinced of that. Doesn't matter, says getting Josh Allen on a Hugh Jackson-led team would be casting pearls before swine. I'm not sure Hugh Jackson would agree with that analogy, but I certainly get it. I certainly get it. Josh Allen was put into a fairly good situation there with the Buffalo Bills, and it has certainly paid off, and it has certainly worked. Um, and that was a good situation for Josh Allen, and it's worked. Did you watch any of that Lions Bills game yesterday, Fred?
No, I
I
was
did.
working.
Yes, yes. I was not.
What you
I,
guys don't understand is like I go to the stadium like 9 in the morning and I get home like 9 at night.
right, right. I watched the Browns and the Chiefs, and I ran as far away from Cleveland Browns football as I could. As soon as that game had concluded, you did not have that opportunity. And I did watch the Bills and the Lions game, and the gap between that game and the one that I watched between 1 and 4 o'clock was monumental. And Josh Allen was just freaking amazing in that game with his legs and with his arm, and Jared Goff was amazing in that game.
It's probably when a season like this, I don't even watch games. It used to I watch games because it was like, how does this affect the Browns' playoff chances? And how that all fits. I just kind of like push back. The Browns have turned it off, the interest in football until next year for me. I mean, I just don't get into watching teams that, really don't affect what's happening with the Browns. And it's sad. I used to be more of a fan of it, but it's like
Mm,
just to sit down and watch a game, I don't enjoy it. So I've done other things with my time.
right, right. King of all blunders points out that Baker Mayfield was hurt, obviously, his last year with the Browns, thanks to the Barry wide receiver draft pick not even trying to catch it. Baker tried to make a tackle he couldn't have. He shouldn't have, rather, pointing out the reason that Baker's last year in Cleveland was not good. Eric J.K. pointing out that Drew Aller um, is not declaring. And I think that's a very smart move on his part. As an Ohio State Buckeyes fan, I have mixed feelings about it. But Drew Aller not declaring, he's going to get one more year at Penn State, which I think is a very smart move because I think it'll put him in the first round of the draft. And I think it's very smart. Also from expert JK, I don't mind pairing Mason Graham with the current D line. That would be scary now that Isaiah has been developing well. If you were listening to the tail end of Quincy's show, he asked Pete and Jacob and said himself who their favorite acquisitions this offseason would be. And Quincy said it would be Abdul Carter. Pete said it would be Mason Graham, both defensive players, both front seven players. Fred, I'm looking at this offense. Obviously, we need a quarterback. That offensive line needs help. Running game needs help. If you're looking at that first draft pick, um, boy, these defenders, the defensive ends, the defensive tackles look so tempting because they are so good. But can you justify spending that top draft pick on a defensive player when the offensive needs are so great?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's defense is closer to being, dominant. And I think if you can make one side of the ball dominant, like I just laid out before, the Steelers last year, if you watch the Steelers in 2023, I didn't think they were a very good team at all. And yet they still made it to the playoffs, 10-7, with Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph at quarterback. And you thought,
Mm-hmm.
they're okay, so they went out and got two more. I didn't think that would make that much difference. But the Russell Wilson, like I said, a game manager didn't lose games for him, where Kenny Pickett lost games for him. That defense kept him in the games all year. And this year's the same thing, except you got a quarterback who's able to get to the ball of the guys to win games when they need to. And so their defense just doesn't seem to fall off. And I think the Browns could, if they could get some players, blue chip players to go in there. I told you the defense dropped off. Part of it, I think, because when they traded Zadarius Smith, their pass rush hasn't been as
Mm-hmm.
strong as it was
Right.
earlier. And, you got to get some guys. Hopefully, Michael Hall can be that guy on the inside, but get a pass rusher on the outside, because we're not going to be able to say for much longer that Myles Garrett needs somebody to opposite to take some of the pressure off him, because it seems like teams are able to just focus on stopping him and the rest of them don't do anything, to
Right.
the extent that they're supposed to.
Well, you put an Abdul Carter on the other side of that line, that gets real scary in a hurry, or a Mason Graham. It gets really scary. Uh, Trip down the stairs says, I don't trust Andrew Berry to draft any position, especially offensive linemen. His best one is DeJuan Jones, who can't stay in the field, hard pass. Understandable. It's understandable at this point. I was accused earlier today of of being an Andrew Berry apologist. That's not exactly how it was put, but of being overly kind to Andrew Berry. And I will admit that his draft record is, let's put it charitably, mixed. Certainly on the offensive line. I think his trade record is mixed to good. I think his salary cap record is, I think he's pretty good at handling the salary cap. But the draft record, which a lot of people, consider to be the most critical aspect of being a GM, you can certainly discuss it. But I think you can certainly make an argument there that his track record picking offensive linemen has not been that strong. Do you agree, Fred?
Well, I think that, yeah, there's where you can go two different ways. Has he grown in 5 years? But because he hasn't had the 3 first-round picks and the second-round picks, missed out on a lot of guys, like who he would have taken, we'll never know. But those guys should be the heart and soul of the team by now. I mean, even if you didn't hit on all of them. And so that's what's frustrating. You gave up all this. You could do that if you had a Pro Bowl quarterback, in
Mm-hmm.
tow, but you have worse. So, yeah, at this point, you change gears. You don't have any guarantee unless there's some proven GM that has a Hall of Fame resume on guys he picked. You just don't know what they're going to do. But to your point, he's had the 2 first-round picks. You took Jed Wills and Greg Newsome. Neither of them, to me, especially the 10th pick in the draft, was a bust. And, now you're entrusting that. So you're like going on the goodness that, okay, he's in 5 years now, he really knows what they're looking. I think Michael Hall, it was a second-round pick. I think
Mm-hmm.
he has potential to be, a good player. But you don't know because they didn't have a chance to pick, so you don't really know what they were looking.
Right.
You're only looking at 3rd and 4th and 5th rounders, and some of them are like hidden gems. I mean, the JOK to trade up to get him, that was a good move. But few and far between. The swings and misses on 3rd-round pick wide receivers has been abysmal, and so the point's well taken,
Mm-hmm.
You got to
Yeah.
show me, and this draft's going to be real important. He's shown that he can spend, he's had to work around it because of the trade of Watson and because Jimmy Haslam's been willing to spend the money, as Jack Duffin has pointed out. That's bailed out Barry because you can make a trade for Amari Cooper because all you got to do is absorb the salary,
Yeah.
and restructure it. And anybody can evaluate a guy who's already a Pro Bowler. I mean, you go, hey, that guy's good. I want him. That's what you do with your fantasy team. But they've made it work, or a 5th or 6th round pick because they would take on the $23 million salary that Dallas wanted to get rid of. But the Browns could make it work by restructuring, and same thing with Jerry Jeudy. So, all the way around, I think that's been his forte, is free agency and trades. So if Jimmy's willing to spend the money again and continue, they can plug holes in free agency. by getting it seems like whenever they think they're going to plug a hole, like at safety, John Johnson doesn't play the same in Cleveland.
Right.
Juan Thornhill doesn't play the same in Cleveland, and then they go somewhere else and they're back to playing the way, so I don't know. I don't know who's to blame, fitting it in or whatever, but it's too important of an offseason. We're going to be talking about the same things next year if they don't hit on some of these moves they have to make.
Yeah, this is a wildly critical draft for Andrew Berry. He's got to do very, very well in this draft. Stephen Glock postulates a Andrew Berry in a first round pick to the Eagles for Howie Roseman. I don't think the Eagles are going to let Howie Roseman go, even with a first round pick. I would not want to let this year's first round pick go. It's too darn good. Maybe some year when we go deep in the playoffs, we can talk about that. But
who makes that trade? Does the general manager trade himself, or does?
I don't know. I think that would require Jimmy Haslam to be a little bit more hands-on than we really want Jimmy Haslam to be. But at any rate, thank you to Core Home Fitness. The other thing that keeps these free OBR streams going on the OBR streaming network is the OBR VIP premium service. We sell subscriptions, and with those subscriptions, you get exclusive access to our VIP premium story forums, including Insider Central for premium scoops, Ask the Insiders, where Lane Atkins and our other writers answer all your questions. Lane by himself is sort of worth the price of admission. You get all the OBR VIP stories and the exclusive recruiting and transfer portal scoop from across the 24/7 Sports Network. As soon as you renew your membership, you get, after the first month or after the first year, you get Paramount Plus with Showtime thrown in for free. That basically pays for the subscription by itself. Coming soon, we're going to have a VIP-only Discord server for game and insider chats. We're going to have all kinds of stuff. We got all kinds of surprises set up for this year. So if you want to support the OBR and these streams and all the other stuff we do for free, please consider joining and getting the VIP content that we provide with our VIP service. We sure would appreciate it. All right. So let's go to a question from Ask the Insiders. This comes from Browns 0913. He says, if Ken Dorsey was brought in to unlock Deshaun Watson, would it make sense for Kevin to bring in someone more aligned with what he wants to run this year? The name I had in mind is Clint Kubiak. He has familiarity with the same system. Kubiak worked with McVay, and the Saints are going to bring in a new coach, so he will likely be available. Ken Dorsey was let go at Buffalo because he was too pass happy, and we're seeing that here again in Cleveland. We're throwing the ball all over the darn place, and we're not running the ball. Do you think, Fred, that Dorsey has to get more aligned with Stefanski's system, or we need somebody new as offensive coordinator?
I think, if whatever has been a colossal failure this year, the offense, was it all at the feet of Watson? Was it at the feet of Dorsey? I mean, since Dorsey's calling the plays, is that a coincidence that it got better, or is it because of better quarterback play with Winston? So I know he likes Clint Kubiak. He talks about him when they played the Saints, and had a lot of respect. So, I could see that happening. Again, I don't know all the background, but I have a feeling that he drug his feet even on letting his buddy Alex Van Pelt go. That he was urged by Andrew Berry or even above him to change the system to unlock more of what Watson could do. And so if that was it, and you are moving on from Watson, even though you're not going to publicly say it, it would make sense to me to have somebody more aligned with Kevin Stefanski. And just like you said, how about letting him have big input in who the next quarterback is as well,
Right.
you know? So, yeah, I think they have to turn over every stone. I think they have to approach this offseason like they did the year they went after Watson. They might have less, you know, assets at their disposal, but I think you have to get that solved. You have to go get who you think is your best chance to turn this thing around the quickest. And that is a ready-made quarterback, not somebody that you got to hope can develop and so forth. That's why I think a trade or a free agent, is a better place to go, unless you have a top 3 pick and you're convinced one of those top 3 quarterbacks are going to be able to step in and be successful in the NFL.
I've just seen so much ludicrous, in my opinion, analysis, this week. I saw one piece, I'm not going to say who wrote it or anything like that, but I saw one piece saying we should start Jameis Winston the rest of the year to see if Jameis Winston can change. Do we honestly think Jameis Winston's going to change at this point? I mean, he is who he is. He throws a lot of interceptions. He's a fastball pitcher who throws the ball into coverage. He's always been that way, right? Yeah, we're not going to fix that. We're not going to roll him out there and hope he's going to change, and hope for a different result. That's insanity, right? Or an article appeared saying that we're going to have Deshaun Watson compete for a starting job, as if all these accumulated excuses for what happened last year means that he's going to revert after an Achilles and a shoulder injury into the 2020 Deshaun Watson again. And we're going to roll him out there, and there's going to be magic fairy dust sprinkled on Deshaun Watson, and he's going to go back to the 2020 Deshaun Watson. I'm with you, Fred. I want something rolled out that we can depend on, that we know what we're going to get when we go out there. Not hope, but something that we can count on in terms of production at the quarterback position. And I'm hearing schemes that are not that being floated out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's where you're at, as far as it's an important position. I still go back to that. If you remember what I said, Deshaun Watson didn't have to be elite. He didn't have to be what he was in 2020, and the Browns could get to the playoffs with just an average quarterback play. I still think with just average quarterback play, they would have beat the Giants, the Raiders, and maybe, another game in there that they lost early on. And that could have changed the whole directory of the season. They might not have won the Super Bowl, but if he was just average, I said if he was just average, they could make the playoffs. He would have to be elite by the end of the year and and that's what I thought he would do, is work his way back into some shade of what he used to be, but he never did. He can't stay on the field. So that's your blueprint. He's injured all the time, and you can't expect and you can't count on him. So you have to go another direction. And what's your options? Find your best options and go all in to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's where we are. I think we need to reboot that quarterback room, and Stefanski needs to have significant input into who we get, right? And somebody who can work in his system and produce reliable results week in, week out. Doesn't have to be Josh Allen, doesn't have to be Patrick Mahomes, but has to be someone who can operate this offense to the degree that our defense can help us win games like they do in Pittsburgh. So that's my thoughts. All right.
Yep.
I think that's it. I think we're at 9:00 now. I think it's time to roll the carpet up here. So I want to thank everyone who's been hanging out with us tonight. I want to thank you for your questions, your comments. As always, you guys light a fire under the program. And I want to thank you, Mr. Legend, Fred Greetham, for your wisdom as always.
Thank you.
So thanks for hanging out with us. Fred and I will be back here next Monday at 8 o'clock to talk about the big win over the Bengals. And we will talk to you then. Good night, everybody.
See ya. Thank you.